Okay, so tell me what you want to chat about.
Yeah, so we had quite an extensive call a few months ago. And the information you gave me then I used, and I organized a call within our club, and yeah, a lot of athletes joined it. For the people that didn't hear that call yet, that's also recorded, so you can go back to the first call, listen to that, and maybe listen to this one after. And then we basically did the heat zone test. Some people did it for the second time, and then yeah, we just started training and experimenting and see how can you be in your heat zone basically at least three times a week. So and I think we encountered some things that I would like to discuss, just some practical things and just some findings that I'm interested in hearing from you, what your experience is in, let's say, within the whole field of people that use your sensor. And I can imagine that Isaac, who has been training with the core for months, and maybe Michiel as well, have some specific questions for them. But let me start with saying that we really noticed, or I myself, and Isaac as well, really noticed a difference in the last race that we did, which again had a 30+ Celsius marathon. And we were really able to just maintain pace throughout the end. So it was
Excellent.
So that was great. And the period leading up to the race was really we really tried to be in that heat zone 3 times a week for 45 minutes. But in the first part of that whole training period, I was experimenting with different types of training sessions and see if it's possible, if it's basically feasible to be in that heat zone. And I just drew some conclusions during that period. So one of them is biking outside. It's basically impossible to get into your heat zone. Even if you're doing race pace intervals, if you're not continuously pushing, then you will go you will drop below your heat zone. And that's maybe the first question, because it has to be a 45-minute block of being in your heat zone. If you dip out of it, let's say 0.2 degrees, and you go back in, then the app doesn't register it as a proper heat training session, right?
Correct. Yes.
But do you think that's really the case then? If you just dip out and come back in,
yeah, that's probably not the case. I think our app takes a pretty black and white look at things. But yeah, just to say that I agree that outdoor cycling, unless it's very, very hot weather out, or you have a very extended climb where you're, going very low speeds, it's pretty darn hard to stay in a heat training zone.
Yeah. Okay. So that's okay. And then if you look at outside running, so we just ran 1 hour 15, and I basically almost always touch on 45 minutes of heat zone if I run outside, even though it's easy. Is that your experience as well?
Yes, and this is why we are now looking also at the heat strain index. Are you looking at that also?
Yes.
Well, I see it.
Uh-huh.
But if I speak for myself, I'm mostly looking at, am I hitting that 45 minutes of heat zone 3 times a week at least?
Mhm.
Yes. Then I do this. I say, nice job. Another week of heat training in the bank.
Yes.
So are you going to tell me now that it's more complicated than that?
Possibly. So here's what we're trying, and we don't have answers to this. But as you have noticed, is that running, it's pretty easy to get into your heat training zone. And if it's cool weather outside, is you can be in your heat training zone and not have a performance decline and just feel pretty comfortable about it. Maybe you're sweating lightly, but it's not a big deal.
Yes.
And it raised the question for us is, are we getting really great physiological adaptions from that? And, as I go through phases where I run every day of the week and get into that zone, and especially in the winter, I do this and get into that zone, but I know that I am not heat adapted for that. And
Sorry.
that's okay. So this is where the heat strain index comes in, which is also looking at skin temperature. And it's a combination of the two, the heat strain index. It takes into account core temp and skin temp. And the idea is when there is less of a gradient between core temp and skin temp, your body has to work a lot harder to cool itself. And
Yes.
that is when the physiological adaptations happen, when your body is working hard to cool itself. So what we would say is that a really good indication of a heat session is that your heat strain index is over 3. And it doesn't mean that no adaptions are happening when it's below that, but based on the sessions that we see indoors, where, a very controlled setting, we know what's going on, is that people, when they're doing heat training, their heat strain index is over 3. And personally, if I was, what's that?
Sorry to interrupt, but you say 3, is that 300 or?
No, I'm sorry, 3.0.
Okay, yes. Okay, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, please.
That's okay, no worries. And so, yeah, our sense is that if all of your sessions were outdoors and running, and even if you had your time in the heat zone, but your heat strain index was around a 1 or so, is that you're not getting the adaptions that you could be getting.
Okay. Yeah, because so if I look at this morning, I was in my heat zone for 53 minutes outside running, and my heat strain index was 0.62.
And so that tells me your skin temperature was very low.
Yeah, but that also makes sense if it's like 2 degrees Celsius outside.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So you basically want to try to warm up your skin more, but that's gonna
what
real
what
hard.
were you wearing? Were you wearing what you're wearing right now?
Yeah, I was wearing 3 layers. So a tank top, long sleeve base layer, and this shirt, and a cap, and then basically sort of like long running pants.
So here's what I would suggest for the days where you want that to be a heat session, is over your base layer, over your first layer, is wear a waterproof rain jacket. So a running rain jacket, and then put on your other warmer layer on top of that. And what that does is it will prevent your sweat from evaporating, and you'll
Yeah.
notice a huge difference. And your heat strain index will be 3 or 4 or 5, and you'll say, "Oh wow, this is hard."
Yeah. Okay. And so because you don't want it to be too much, right? So you want to be like right on that, let's say, on that point where it does really help you with benefiting from heat, but you don't want to overdo it.
Exactly.
Because if you're
And
running in a like a garbage bag or something, then it's probably going to be a little bit too much.
yeah, or at least very uncomfortable. I don't know if it'd be more so than the raincoat. But so the number I said over 3.0, and generally between 3.0 and 6.0 is what we see most people on a when they're doing heat training indoors.
Okay. Okay,
And
then yeah.
if somebody has a really high heat training zone, they may be over 6.0, but for people whose heat training zone is somewhere around 38.5, I wouldn't expect them to have to be over 6.0, and doing so would probably be too much for them.
Okay. Okay. So I want to jump into the how you really define your heat training zone in a little bit. I just have a couple more questions about the heat training sessions themselves. So yesterday I did a almost 90 minutes indoor bike with I was just wearing let's say a summer outdoor outfit. I
Mhm.
was wearing it indoors and there was no fan. So this means within, let's say, 25 to 30 minutes, I'm in my heat zone.
Mhm.
And to be honest, it doesn't really matter if I go at 300 watts or at 210 watts. It just takes, maybe the difference is 5 minutes, but it just really takes 20 minutes to get the oven going, so to speak. I don't know if that's what you see as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
yeah,
pretty typical. It's hard to
yeah,
get there faster than 15
yeah,
or 20 minutes.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So it has to be really intense to get there, like at like between 15 and 20, in my
Yeah,
experience.
yeah.
So so now if I just want to do an indoor heat session that doesn't kill everything in my whole system, I just accept that it's 25 to 30 minutes, and then I'm in it. And then it's fairly easy to stay in the heat zone.
Mhm.
Um, and it doesn't, I mean, I would say it's like you can do that at like a 4 out of 10.
Mhm.
But if I look at my heat strain index of yesterday, which was so it was an indoor bike session, it's only 2.
Okay.
So it's not good enough. If I look,
Well, yeah, I won't say that it's not good enough. Again, that number, that 3.0, that's a that's a rough guess. So tell me how hard you were sweating.
like hell.
Okay, then it's probably good. And did you have decoupling of heart rate from power?
I guess not. But that will bring me to the knowing your heat zone in a little bit, because that's
Mm-hmm.
also part of the heat zone test, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, so okay, but no, let's stick with the heat training sessions for just a few minutes, and then
Uh-huh.
we come back to the heart rate decoupling as well. Um, yeah, so okay, so it's basically sweating a lot is
Mm-hmm.
good.
Sweating a lot is good.
Yeah,
Decoupling of heart rate from power is good also.
yeah, but if you're doing this for many months, then my experience is that stops the decoupling. If you're very
Yeah.
trained and you are heat adapted, then at some point there's no more decoupling, right? Or you have to go really hard in a session. It has to be like a tough interval session. Then you have decoupling, of course. But
Okay.
then um, you jump out of your heat zone. You go too high,
Yes.
right? Those sessions.
Yes.
So I think it's, if you want to really stick within the bandwidth of your heat zone, then if you are good, trained well enough for heat and for just general fitness, there's no more decoupling. Or do you see that different?
Well, so here's the question is once you are adapted, it is possible that your heat zone becomes higher. And so in other words, if your heat zone is centered around 38.5 and you would do heat sessions there and get, 5 or 10% decoupling, and then after you're adapted, you stop getting decoupling.
Yeah.
Is if you bumped up your heat zone to say centered around 38.7, maybe that's what causes the 5%, 10% decoupling. And if you were to then do your heat training there, possibly you could adapt so that you did not get decoupling at 38.7. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, you're really luring me into the heat training zone subject.
Yeah,
But
yeah, it's all tied.
I just want to know if Isaac or maybe Michiel has specific questions on, let's say, heat training sessions, running, cycling, indoor, outdoor, like basically in line with the stuff that we just discussed.
I do, but it is also related to my heat training zone. So
Not again.
I'll start it later. Because,
Okay.
I have a very specific. few
Well, I
questions.
had something.
Yeah.
I did the test yesterday night, and I was training before that 3 weeks in Dubai, which is pretty warm. So it was easy to hit your core temperature outdoors. But I did the test yesterday, and it took like a fair bit amount of time to even reach 38. And it was actually the first time I did the test, and Ramon didn't really tell me. I knew I watched your video, and you told me some parts about the test, but it was actually a really tough test. And at some point, like after an hour 15, and I was saying, because my power really didn't drop that much, and at some point I was like, I think my legs are just giving out, or just what
Yeah.
time do you have to stop? So after, I think we did another 15 minutes, and my core temperature stayed the same, so it was 38.8. And my power didn't drop anymore, and my heart rate was constant as well. And as soon as I got off the bike, just call it a test, the core temperature started immediately dropping instead of going still a little bit up.
Yeah.
So that was also my question, like, didn't I push hard enough, or?
Yeah, if it takes that long to get to 38 and then you don't get any dropping or decoupling of heart rate, is you probably need a warmer room or need to be dressed warmer. I mean, it sounds like you're quite well heat adapted right now. If it took you that long and you're at 38.8 and feeling comfortable, what was your heat strain index during that? Do you know?
4.6
Uh-huh.
for the whole session.
Okay. Yeah, try dressing warmer, or a warmer
Right.
room if that's possible. I don't know. The waterproof rain jacket as the second layer is a really good way of getting your temperature up very quickly if you don't have a super warm room.
All right.
Okay. So
It's good to know. Yeah.
the room was, I think, 20 degrees. Yes.
Okay.
And we were there with like 4 or 5 athletes who were cycling everybody was cycling.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, I guess it just warmed up quite fast.
Uh-huh.
So you really think it's more about it's more about dressing warmer for the test itself, you mean?
Yeah, if you in a 20-degree 20-degree room is you need to be wearing winter clothes. You know, and that waterproof layer is a really helpful one. And then a warmer couple of layers of warmer jersey on the outside, a hat, long pants. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah, you did notice because after a while, your thermal layer was just soaked, and I think then it works more like a cooling mechanism. And still,
Yes.
of course, you're generating heat, but you're just having this wet layer around you.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I found also when it's in that cool of a room temperature is that you get too much sweat evaporation.
Yeah. Okay. So what Michiel was describing, let's say basically the flat lining of everything, you know, at some point during the test, that happened to me as well, and to you as well, Isaac, or no? Okay, so I thought maybe I'm just too well adapted, but you're saying no, you're not wearing enough clothing for the
Possibly, or
test.
the room temperature isn't hot enough. Yeah, I mean when we do internal testing and most testing in laboratories is they're using a room temperature of 30. Um, and I know that's not feasible in many situations, but that's where the overdressing comes into play to compensate for that. And that waterproof layer as a second layer is a really good way to do that.
Okay,
The
but
thing
is
I
what?
would, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I've one more question about that, um, because it's not super clear how many layers you got to wear and at what power output you should start, and you know, because you leave it a bit open, right, in the
Mhm.
in the protocol.
Mhm.
And that's basically my biggest question about determining your zone. Will it be the same result if so now I started at 250 watts, for instance. If I
Mhm.
start at 310 and I'm wearing a rain jacket, will the
Mhm.
result can the result really differ in terms
Yeah.
of what a heat zone is?
Well, the important part that we have seen there is to have a steady rise in core temperature over that first 20 minutes of the test. And for that warm-up phase where you get to 38.0 to take somewhere between 15 and 25 minutes. Um, and if that follows, you should get the same result. A too quick of a warm up or too long of a warm up, you'll get a different result.
So you mean the time it takes to get to 38.0, right?
Yeah, should take a roughly 20 minutes or so, give
Yeah.
or take a few minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So if the intensity is too high or you're wearing 15 layers, then it goes faster and that will change the result.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So until now, everybody has been doing it on the bike.
Hmm.
One guy he's just running. He's not in this call, but he's using the core. Um, and that's my other question. Do you think it will give a different result if you are running on the treadmill?
It shouldn't. We've done tests on that where we have had the same athlete do on the bike and then on the treadmill. Um, for most people, it gives the same. Is I've heard stories where it doesn't, and so here's what I'm going to encourage you to do is to not get too hung up on the heat ramp test, and to think of the general purpose of it, which is for most people, say 80% of the population, a heat training zone is going to be centered right around 38.5. What we want to do, though, is identify those for whom it's significantly lower or for whom it's significantly higher, right? Because somebody like myself it's significantly lower. And if I went out and tried to do heat training at 38.5, I would kill myself. And so this is what the heat ramp test is meant to do, especially for people who are not in a coached situation where they can have a coach saying, you know, hey, something's off here, back off. If they're doing the test at home, whatever. We want them to be aware, hey, you know, stop the test at 38.4 if need be. Likewise, for people who have a higher heat training zone, there are people who can chug along at 38.5 and barely breaking a sweat. And so they also need to be at a higher thing. So I guess my point is, if you have a result where, okay, you flatlined at 38.8, and it's clear that it's just because you weren't in a hot enough room or that you weren't wearing enough clothes, I would suggest doing a heat training zone or a heat training session where your zone is centered around 38.5 and see how it feels and see how it goes. And that you should have that heat strain index somewhere between 3 and 6. You shouldn't feel nauseous. You should feel, okay, this is hard. I'm sweating. I'm getting some heart rate decoupling of 5 or 10%. But, you know, so it's, in other words, it's not as exact as perhaps the heat ramp test might suggest that it is.
Yeah, because if you, so let's take 38.8 as an example, then it's according to your literature, it's minus 0.5.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's 38.3 until 38.5. 6.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Um,
But if you didn't get that 20% decoupling at 38.8, it's safe to assume that, okay, it's
slightly
would
higher.
actually be higher.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay.
so here's how I think of it, is that when you get that the temperature at which you get 20% decoupling, we know that that's a strain on your body, but we also know that's a pretty hard strain on your body, is you don't want to be doing that 3 times a week. That's just going to wipe you out.
Yeah.
And we know that somewhere between, you know, let's say 38.0 for most people is when you start to get decoupling of a little bit at the beginning of the test. And so if you're getting decoupling somewhere in that 5 to 10% range, that's probably a good metric for gauging, is it a good heat session or not? Because that's saying, all right, your body is having to work hard to get rid of that heat because it's diverting a lot of blood from the muscles to the skin, and that's what causes the adaptions.
Okay. So right now, today, you think the decoupling is really necessary for it to be a good session, a heat session?
It's a really good question. And to be honest, I can't say definitively that that's the case, because the scientific literature hasn't looked at this. You know, they do short-term studies. They don't do follow-ups where they progressively increase temperatures. What I'm basing this on is anecdotal stuff that I hear from coaches, that we hear from the pro teams. You know, the pro teams are pretty tight-lipped about exactly what they see and exactly what they're doing, because, you know, this is valuable information. But this is the sense that we are getting. And back to what I was getting at earlier, is this question of, is it possible to progressively raise your heat training zone where you get decoupling at a higher and higher core temperature is this is what we're getting hints are happening at the pro level, is that people are seeing that of, okay, I no longer get decoupling at 38.5. And so now I've gone up to 38.7, and okay, at 38.7, I no longer get decoupling, so I'm going up to 38.9. And so to gradually build your tolerance that way.
But it's if I think about that, also for non-pro athletes, that's tough.
Uh-huh.
That's tough. That's not it's that makes it a bit or a lot harder to maintain that heat adaptation.
Well, I'm not, yes, I guess it does. And so to me, it gets to a question of how important is it to you to get those adaptions, right? So if you're racing at 30 degrees and you know that you can hit your target pace without overheating, then there's probably no reason to do more than that. If you're racing at Kona and you're running a 250 marathon and you know how much heat is being generated for that, then yeah, you need to be up at a higher level. So I would say that's not necessary for every athlete to do that, because those of us at the age group level are generating a lot less heat than those at the pro level. And it may be entirely sufficient to have to be adapted at where your core temp is at 38.5, where you're getting no decoupling. I happen to see, for some whatever reason, a lot of graphs from people's marathons. And it's really common for me to see people who have done heat adaptation for a marathon. They're racing core temp the entire time. The entire race is 38.5, and their heat strain index is a 1 or a 2, and they say no, they had no decoupling of pace. And so for them, that worked great. And these are people running a 3-hour, 3:15 marathon. So for that level of heat they are generating, that's all they needed to do. If they were running a 2:30 marathon, they may need to do more because they're generating a lot more heat.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
is it time for your?
Well, we spoke to each other earlier by mail, actually, and it's good to hear from one low thermostat to another, since we have
Okay.
Well, to explain to the other people is we have low thermostats. You call people with a low
Yes.
zone, basically. So when I did my test in a 25 degrees Celsius room wearing winter clothes, it was really easy for me to get into a heat zone and to finish the test, I think, within the hour at least.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have, well, so I noticed I was very easy to get into this heat zone. Also, this weekend we did a bike ride when it was around 0 Celsius, and I was pushing on the bike ride for a while. Actually, the bike ride qualifying for heat training, which is
surprising
for most, but
yeah.
for us maybe it's not so difficult to get there. Do you have special? Do you have some, I don't know, some advice for people with low thermostats for the training zone? Because, like I said, it's very easy to get into this zone. So, but you say maybe look into the heat strain index a little bit more, or is that what you?
Yeah, I think that is an important one. And if you're looking at it as a heat session, is your heat strain index over 3.0?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's definitely something to look at. Yeah. yeah, I think that was the most important question for me to ask. Because I was in doubt if I should redo the test to see if it changed a lot. But when we did the race in Barcelona, where it was 30 degrees Celsius, we did, after doing the heat zone trainings, it was very easy on the run and on the bike actually to stay fresh.
Okay.
Even though I was way higher than my heat zone. So that's the.
Uh-huh.
But by then, yeah, when you get over that heat zone in a race, it's of course it's not bad.
Yeah, and the thing that I would encourage you then is it's very possible that you're somebody who quickly adapted to higher temperatures. You know, it's possible that you start it with a low zone and maybe do a follow-up test once you've done some heat sessions. You may find that that's different. I did some things this past spring. Is right now I'm a very casual athlete. I'm a dad athlete of young kids, and my training is staying healthy and fit. And I've always suffered in Swiss summers from humidity, and it always would go out for a run first thing in the morning before it was hot, etc., and then just lay low the rest of the day. And I said, all right, this summer I'm going to do different. And I did what I would call very casual heat training, which was just wearing extra layers in the spring. No big deal. And just, monitoring, was I getting in my heat zone and whatnot. And what I found was that when the temperatures got above 30 and high humidity and everybody's talking heat wave, oh my God, stay inside, I was just, no big deal. Wow. It's, I would go out for a bike ride in the middle of the day in the hot sun and just think, oh, this is no big deal. And I have not done I did not do a follow-up heat ramp test, which I should have, but such is my life right now. At any rate, my point being is that I'm confident that it raised up from there, just from that small amount of casual adaptation. So I would encourage you, anybody who reads on that low thermostat, to frequently retest after you've done some heat sessions.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna plan it.
Yeah. Okay. So the big two takeaways that I hear are first of all, for the heat ramp test, dress warmer.
Mm-hmm.
And dress into something that doesn't get like completely wet and basically makes you colder after an hour or an hour 15 if you're completely soaked
Yes.
in sweat, because that influences the test in a negative fashion.
Yep.
So that's one, and then two, it's linked basically. I would say the heat strain index should lean towards 3. I just looked at my last marathon. I was pacing the sub 3 guys, which is never like a walk in the park, right? I mean, even though I wasn't going like all out, if you're pacing sub 3, it's still like pacing.
It's work.
And my heat strain index was still well below 3. It was like 2.1 or something.
Okay.
But if I think about it, it probably should and does qualify for a proper heat session, running a marathon like that, being in your heat zone for that, extended amount of time.
Yeah.
Don't get to 3.0. Do you agree with that, or?
Yeah, probably. The is the thing I would look at is your decoupling of heart rate. So I think of over the course of a marathon, is if I see somebody's heart rate has decoupled more than 5%, it tells me that either A, they went at too hard of a pace, and then of course you see it at, their pace is declining towards the end, or it tells me they were getting heat stress. So for you, this wasn't a race, so I'm confident you weren't getting
Massive
fatigue
decoupling was not happening.
decoupling.
No.
What's that? Yeah. So if you were getting decoupling of your heart rate, that would be because of heat.
Yeah. No, my heart rate was extremely steady.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so maybe it doesn't count as a heat session then. If we want to accept my theory that you need some decoupling to tell your body, hey, we're working here, you need to adapt to these conditions. So you can look at it as, or here's another way of possibly looking at it, is maybe that counts as a maintenance heat session, in the sense of you're maintaining that level where you can go at 38.5 heat strain 2.0 and not have any bad effects from it. And so from a maintaining standpoint, yeah, that probably is good. From a building standpoint, building to a higher level, probably not.
Yeah. I completely feel what you're saying, because if I get to 39, I'm crying.
Uh-huh.
You know?
Yeah.
So okay, in that sense, if you want to prepare for like Kona, which I have to,
Mm-hmm.
then yeah, you need to do more. You need to
Yeah.
go to above that 3.0 heat strain, and you want to see more decoupling, but it's tough.
Yes.
So talking about, let's say, mid and long-term maintenance and building, it's probably nice to maintain at a certain point. For me, maybe that's this right now. And then if you're coming, let's say, final 3 months before a warm race, then you want to build a little bit more, going higher and dressing warmer and wearing that horrible rain jacket
Yes.
on your bike indoors. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And then, of course, you get into the question of, do you want to do this for hemoglobin gains, right? So mostly what we've been talking about are the adaptions for dispersing heat. But we also know that if the heat sessions are done frequently enough for a long enough time, you will get hemoglobin gains. And we know that the physiology behind there is that the body builds plasma as a first adaptation for dispersing heat. And that throws off the balance between the amount of plasma and the amount of hemoglobin you have. It actually decreases the percentage. And your body says, hey, I want to bring that percentage back up to normal. And so it increases hemoglobin mass.
Yeah. That's why I want to do it throughout the whole year, right?
Exactly. Yes. And so we've seen lab studies where they'll take people for 5 weeks and do 5 weeks of 5 sessions a week and have noticeable trackable hemoglobin gains at the end of that 5 weeks. What we don't know is when you do this, as we've talked, 3 times a week for the entire season, how that translates. We know that the pro teams are doing it, so and we know that they have testing, and they're testing hemoglobin all the time, so we have really good reason to believe that is effective. And just that notion of, if you're maintaining added plasma year long, is that your body is going to create more hemoglobin. But this also gets to that question of, when you when you're adapted at 38.5, if you can push your adaptation to where you're at 39, the question is, do you gain more plasma? And if so, do you then gain more hemoglobin?
Yeah.
We don't know that answer.
Yeah. I think there's probably a max, right? Of what you mean. We're a closed system, so you cannot unlimitedly produce more plasma and therefore hemoglobin, right? I mean, how much room is there?
Yeah, I don't know. I know that when I'm well heat adapted is my wedding ring. I can't take it off, and it's not because I've gained 4 kilos in my belly, but it's because I get that fat finger thing in the summer, and that's plasma.
Yeah.
But yeah, how much can you get? I don't know.
Yeah. That's one of the unknowns, I guess. But it's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So just one personal question from which really I'm noticing is if I do an indoor heat session and I'm sweating quite substantially, I often do have that, ammonia smell in my sweat, which is usually it's like an alarm for me, because then you might be burning, muscle for fuel. But in this case, I am fairly confident that's not happening, because I'm always fueling carbs during session. So that it would make no sense for my body to burn muscle, which is a lot harder to burn for fuel than the carbs I'm drinking. I was just wondering, do you have any other data or anecdotal data or stories from other coaches or athletes that have this same experience?
I personally have experienced it on occasion, and I've looked into it and didn't come into any conclusive evidence or conclusive answers.
Okay.
I had a hunch that it was my just bad diet at the time. I don't know if that was the case. But now that you bring that up, I'm going to ask our team of researchers if there's anything in the literature about that, and I will get back to you, because that reminds me that once that went away from me, as I kind of forgot about it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, because you want to be precautious, of course. If you're doing that 3 times a week and you have that smell 3 times a week, you want to, because you can also just burn. It can also be a sign of burning protein that's in your diet. I know, but yeah, it just because usually if I have a really 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 hard session, or it's like a race, or sometimes you can smell that, but you smell it on a regular basis, then yeah, you have to look into it, in my opinion. But if
so
you
are
can
you getting that in every heat session or just sometimes?
well, I would say mostly. If I
Okay.
do like indoor session with like heavy sweating, I have it mostly.
And to add to that, I also do have it, but I often only get it after I finish my training. So
Okay.
as soon as I stop, then it starts to produce the ammonia.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, I will check if I have it during, but maybe it's a bit hard to smell during the.
It could be.
I'll ask my wife. She will definitely tell me immediately if that's the case. Please smell me. Okay.
If I may,
Yeah, sure.
I have a question about the app. Because
oh wait, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Sure. Yeah.
Because I want to talk about the practical side of the app and the sensor and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I just have one more question about heat training, and I've been testing, and then I want to dive into that, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Because I've been doing passive heat strain as well, especially in the final part of the taper right before a race, because obviously I don't want to be sitting on a bike with a rain jacket on in race week.
Yep.
And that's also what you warned us about, don't overdo it in the final week before your race, because you can. And I've been doing sauna, I've been doing really hot baths, and I'm sweating like hell. So obviously you're sweating more when you're better heat adapted. But the core temperature is really staying low according to the sensor. It really feels like 7 or 8 out of 10. But the sensor is telling me, oh no, you're at a very comfortable 37.8 right now.
So are you doing this after a workout, or are you doing it just starting from baseline temperature?
No, in the taper, I'm just starting it from baseline.
Okay, so a couple of things there is one, the core sensor is not going to give you accurate readings either in the bath or in the sauna. So that's not going to be worthwhile. But the thing that we have found when we were doing validation tests of the core sensor with the e-pill in the sauna or in the hot bath is that if you are starting from a baseline core temperature and go into the sauna, it takes a long time for your core temperature to warm up. Is that your skin gets hot really quick and you're sweating like crazy, but it takes a while for your core temp to get up. As opposed to if you just spend 20 minutes on the bike at an easy pace and get your core temp up to 38 and then get in the sauna, then your core temp will really quickly get into your heat training zone.
So that's a good one then. So you just do easy spin for 20 minutes, then do it.
Yep. So think of the physiology of what's happening there is that your core temp rises because you have generated heat inside your body that the core temp that your body is trying to get rid of. And so if you've generated that heat in your legs and your body's pumping blood to it, and that blood gets dispersed through your core as it's going to your heart and then out to your skin, if you put a big blanket on yourself, that's going to stop that internal heat from being able to leave. And the hot bath or the sauna is the equivalent of a big blanket. You're insulating yourself. As opposed to if you're just receiving heat from the outside, now the body's really good at deflecting that and preventing the core from rising.
Yeah. So for a taper week, you would suggest to say a 15-minute run and then an immediate sauna for the.
Yeah, that'd probably be a good thing, but only if you are comfortable in the sauna, right? Yeah. I know that people who are new to the sauna is 15 minutes or 30 minutes in the sauna totally wipes them out. So definitely would not suggest that in a taper week.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say either bath or sauna. If you've done the pre-warm up of your core, how long would you recommend doing that? Let's say you are somewhat experienced in taking a hot bath or taking a sauna. Do you have any advice on that? Because now I've been doing like 2 times 20 minutes, for instance, in the sauna, or just 40 plus minutes nonstop in a really hot bath. Really hard, so really like 7 or 8 out of 10. It feels to me. So if you do the pre-warm up, how long do you think we should be in the sauna or in the bed?
Well, I would think that 45-minute range.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So what we understand is that for every day without heat training is you lose 2.5% of your gains. So
We don't want to hear this. We don't.
But no, this is actually good news, is because what that means is that during a taper week is if you do 1 or 2 sessions and have your last session be 3 or 4 days before the race, is that you've lost 7 to 10% of truly optimal.
Yeah.
And that's just one of those realities. I mean, that's every coach deals with it, this crossing line of, all right, I'm trying to get my fitness as high as possible, but I'm trying to get my freshness also as high as possible. And to get freshness higher, I need to plateau fitness. It's kind of that same trick.
Yeah. No, of course, I understand. It's better to be fully recovered with a little less fitness than 1% overtrained and then
Yes.
stop the race. So
Yeah, exactly.
okay. Yeah, I think that's it. Just one final question. If you are doing consistent heat training, do you still advise some sort of steep ramp up or build up in like the final, let's say 2-3 months before your most important race?
Well,
adding
to
your consistent heat training.
I think it only is if you get to that notion of you're going to be in a much hotter situation than you normally would be, is to see, hey, can I adapt even more to those conditions? I think what I would want to do before I made that decision is try to simulate the race conditions, maybe in an indoor situation where you get the same temperature and humidity, and do an extended session at race pace and see if you get decoupling. And that should tell you, am I adapted well enough or am I not? Because, there's the reality of that. If you are causing your body more stress by heat adaptation, that's less, your body probably has less ability to push itself in other ways. Maybe you can't do as many zone 4 intervals that week because you've done hard heat sessions. Would be one way of thinking of it. So yeah, so it may be not useful to get more heat adaptation than you need, because you'd be sacrificing other parts of your training to get there.
Yes. Okay. Makes sense. Let's go to the app.
Yeah. For the app, I do have a few. It's a nice app, but I think I do have some tips in maybe improving it a little bit.
Would love to hear them.
To tell you what I'm missing. Is maybe also the connection with your power, either on the bike or from the stride, that you could even see it in one line. I do have the WKO3 from Training Peaks, or WKO5, I mean, where I built a graph where you can see those things together. But yeah, for the app, it would be great if you could actually
see power on there.
Also, yeah.
Okay.
So that that might be a bit difficult to bring that up, because then you have to get like external sources. And the second and last thing I would suggest, and that might be a bit easier to create, is if you see your last workout or a workout, you can narrow it down to a certain timestamp, either 30 minutes or an hour or 4 hours. But what I'm actually missing is the 2-hour slot. So
Okay.
you do have one, say, 30, 45 minutes to warm up, and then you have the 45 minutes, an hour for your actual heat training.
Okay.
And I think that's what you actually want to narrow it down to those 2 hours, that you really want to see it. Okay. So I think that's my suggestion to you guys to make
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The graph. So the actual graph. If you let's say you're doing a session,
Mhm.
opening the app, and then it downloads the history data, right?
Yep.
But the time spent in zones doesn't update live.
Correct. It does not.
That's super annoying.
Yes.
I don't know if that's how difficult that is, or there's probably a reason why it doesn't, but um, because sometimes you're like, ah, shit, I forgot how long I'm in the zone. I didn't actually timestamp when I got into the zone, and you open the app, and you're like, oh, it says 23. And you're like,
Mhm.
no, that's impossible. It cannot be 23. And then you're without it being necessary, you're extending your session, and then afterwards you see, oh shoot, I went all the way to 1 hour and 5 minutes now.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
No, I will pass that along. I'm wondering, as you say this, if an easy way to deal with this is on that landscape view of the chart when you blow up the real-time chart, is if we could put in a little bar
Yeah.
that showed your
Yeah.
heat training zone, and then it's really easy to just look
Yeah.
and see, this is how long I've been there.
That would be amazing.
That makes it more time efficient, I think,
Yeah.
also for training.
Yeah.
Of
Mhm.
course, said after you told us that it's not the only metric we should look at, but also at the index, or the heat training index. But
Yeah.
this would definitely help us as an athlete to find, okay, am I not doing too much? It's like junk miles. You don't want to do junk miles. You don't want to do
Yes.
junk heat training zone. So
Okay.
it
No,
would help.
thank you. I will pass this along to our development team, and I understand that they very much appreciate comments from coaches and athletes. I mean, they are very, very valuable. So I know this will be well received.
Great.
Yeah, just to add to the app, of course, because we use it almost daily basis. So then
Yeah.
it's you see things, tweaks.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Helps.
So you're using the app, but when you're on the indoor trainer, that's what you're using to track your core temp. You're not using your Garmin.
I am
also
using Garmin.
as well, but sometimes I'm also using the Tux indoor training app, and then
Okay.
Core cannot connect to that. Maybe that's another question for the development team, because so you have these indoor trainers, Tux trainers, and
Mhm.
Garmin owns that right now.
Yeah.
So Garmin has this training app, and it can connect to Bluetooth. So I think that it should be fairly easy to do this connection. But right now it's impossible. I cannot, because all the indoor sessions we do on this app right now, and we cannot connect Core. So you would have to simultaneously also use your Garmin bike computer then,
Mhm. Which is annoying.
or use the Core app.
Yeah.
All all together.
No, so we totally understand this frustration. And this is a major thing for us on a weekly basis of working with companies to get integration. And the problem is that most of that work needs to happen from the other company's
Okay.
perspective. They need to do something in their software to enable the connection with Core. And so a lot of it is us convincing them, hey, you guys have a lot of users who are using Core. They would like to see this. And yes, we think you should devote X number of hours of your time to do this. So some companies were more successful with than others, and it's a steadily growing list, but I will put that as a reminder there.
No, sure. I mean, if it's already on the list, then it's fine. It's just something, because Garmin recently made a change in this app, because they basically bought the other company, the Tux company, and now they integrated both apps, but they did not build in this option to connect the core. So,
yeah, and that may not be on our radar, because I know we just think of, yeah, Garmin products, it works great on. So I haven't even heard of our development teams or our integration team say anything about that. So I'll make sure it's on their radar.
yeah, this is because everybody who's using structured workouts from Training Peaks and trains on one of these trainers can now do it through the phone, through this app. So it's really like very easy.
Okay.
Without syncing needed. But then, yeah, you have, so my heart rate strap connects perfectly, but the core doesn't. So
It doesn't read the core data. Yeah. Okay.
All right. I think I think that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, great talking with you guys. Ramon, this reminds me, I always get asked by our PR people of, hey, can you give me some good tips for indoor training? Or we have some journalist who wants to hear what to do in indoor training, and they get sick of hearing from me, and so I try to get other coaches to say things, and wondering if I can give them your name as somebody who would be, happy to talk about indoor training and such.
Yeah, sure. Be
Okay.
happy.
Awesome.
It's I just talk about training, so if it has to be indoor, no problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's various topics that they asked me for, and I always just think it's way more interesting to have other coaches doing this instead of just me. So yeah.
Oh, I just reminded one thing. I have 2 people who have issues with their sensor. One, it looks like one of them never really worked well because it's just giving 42 degrees Celsius all the time.
Okay. Is he certain that it's paired with his heart rate monitor?
Yeah, it's a she, but
Uh-huh.
I will double check that as well because I know there was a situation there. Do you think that could be the solution?
So what I've seen is when it's not paired with the heart rate monitor, I've seen it that core temp will just continually climb and climb and climb. So
Okay.
that's always anytime there's some weird readings, that's always the first thing that I will check.
Okay, I will double check that with her as well. And the other one is that there's the sensor just basically it broke on one
The
of
clip.
one of the legs basically.
Okay. Yeah, have them send an email to info@corebodytemp.com, and they'll get a replacement for you. And then the same with the one that's reading high, is she should also just email that same address, info@corebodytemp.com, and they will troubleshoot it, and if it looks like it's a sensor issue, they'll just replace it.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Thanks for everything. And
Yeah.
if you can share the recording with me somehow, then I will share this internally with the rest.
Awesome. Great chatting with you, Ramon. Nice to see you, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.